My son told me he couldn't stay for Christmas dinner because his mother-in-law was sick. I believed him. I even gave him $10,000 to help with her care. That night, as the house sat quiet and the food grew cold on the table, I opened Facebook and saw them all. My son, his wife, their kids, and the woman who was supposedly ill, smiling on a beach in Hawaii, with my money. They thought I would just take it, that I would stay quiet as always. But that Christmas, something changed in me, and I did something they never expected. The house smelled like cinnamon and cloves, the kind of warmth that only came once a year. I had been up since dawn, basting the turkey, setting the table with the holiday china I hadn't used since Mary passed, and arranging the ornaments on the tree, most of them handmade by small, eager hands that were now growing up far too fast. A crooked little reindeer from Ellie, a lopsided snowman from Lucas. I smiled at each one as I hung it with care. Christmas had always been Mary's favorite. She used to hum carols while stirring cider, sneaking extra marshmallows into the hot cocoa for the kids. It wasn't the same without her, but I tried. I really tried. I wanted this Christmas to feel special again, not just for me but for my grandkids, for Ellie and Lucas. I'd even found the perfect presents. A doll that looked just like Ellie with curly brown hair and big green eyes. A remote-controlled race car for Lucas, wrapped in blue paper with snowmen on it. I had placed them under the tree the night before, imagining their laughter, the way their eyes would light up. I'd made space on the mantel for family photos, lit candles in the window, and even recorded a holiday message on the answering machine in case anyone called. The table was set for 5, me, Noah, Sophia, Ellie, and Lucas. I folded the cloth napkins into neat triangles, placed the silverware just so, and double-checked the cranberry sauce. There was enough food to feed an army. But that's what you do when you're a mother. You prepare. You give. When the doorbell rang, my heart jumped. I thought maybe they were early. Maybe the kids couldn't wait. I wiped my hands on my apron, smoothed the front of my sweater, and opened the door. There was Noah. He looked good. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp wool coat I hadn't seen before. He had one hand in his pocket, the other holding his keys, like he wasn't planning to stay long. "Mom?" he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Can we talk for a second?" No smile, no hug, just those words weighted and vague. "Of course," I said, stepping back. "Dinner's almost ready. Where's Sophia and the kids?" He stepped inside, shook some snow from his collar, and glanced around like he hadn't expected me to go all out. Maybe he thought I'd stopped trying. "They're not coming," he said. "And I'm not staying either." I blinked. The words didn't land right away. What do you mean it's Christmas in 4 days?" He shifted his coat, still buttoned the keys, clinking in his hand. "Sophia's mom. She's really sick, Mom. We just found out. It's bad. We're flying out tonight to be with her." I stared at him. "Sick? What happened?" "It's complicated," he said, already checking his phone. "She needs us. You understand, right? Family comes first." I nodded slowly. Of course I understood. I always understood. But something about the way he said it. It didn't feel like a son explaining. It felt like a man justifying. "I see," I said, my voice even. "But you could stay for dinner at least. Just one meal." He shook his head. "We've got to pack. The flight's early. I just wanted to stop by and explain." Explain. Like I was a colleague, not his mother. I turned toward the tree. "Let me get the kids' gifts then. You can take them." "No, Mom, don't worry about that. Just keep them here for now. We'll be back soon." I hesitated, my fingers brushing against the red wrapping paper. I had spent hours picking that doll, reading reviews online, making sure it was the right kind. I had gone to 3 stores to find that race car for Lucas. "You sure?" I asked. "I can pack them up for you." "Mom, stop," he said sharply, rubbing his temples. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Harder. I swallowed the hurt, nodded like I always did. All right, just tell the kids I love them. And Sophia, send her mom my best. I will, he said, already heading for the door. You need anything for the trip? I offered. Snacks, a blanket for the kids. We're fine, he said quickly. I reached for the doorknob as he opened it. A blast of cold air swept into the room. I must have loosened my grip on one of the packages because it slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. He didn't notice. See you after the holidays, Mom, he said. And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time, the door slowly swinging shut behind him. The street outside was quiet, covered in a fresh layer of snow. His taillights disappeared around the corner like two red pinpricks swallowed by white. Inside, everything was still. I turned off the oven. The turkey would stay untouched. The potatoes, perfectly whipped, would go cold. I looked at the table, the places set the wine glasses, catching the light. It felt like a stage set for a play that would never be performed. I sat down slowly, listening to the faint sound of carols playing on the radio. Silent night, of course. The irony almost made me laugh. I poured myself a glass of cider, but it tasted bitter. I looked at the gifts beneath the tree, now purposeless. The fireplace crackled, but it couldn't warm the hollow feeling in my chest. Noah didn't even let Ellie call to say goodnight. I picked up the remote and turned on the lights strung along the banister. They blinked cheerfully, oblivious to the ache in my bones. I found the ornament Ellie made last year. A little snowflake with her name painted in glitter. I held it gently, ran my thumb over the uneven letters. Children grow up fast, too fast. I thought about Mary. She would have known what to say. She always knew what to say. She would have squeezed my hand and said, "They'll come around. Just give it time." But I had given time. Years of it. I lit a single candle on the table. The flame danced in the silence. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet room, "Merry Christmas, Mary." I tried. And then I ate dinner alone. One plate, one chair, one long, quiet evening. Christmas Eve arrived with a quiet that clung to the walls like frost. The house still smelled faintly of roasted turkey and cinnamon, though the food now sat cold in its dishes untouched. The table remained set. The napkins still folded, the candles burned low. I hadn't touched a single plate. I couldn't bring myself to put it all away. Outside, the snow had thickened. It blanketed the street in soft, white, erasing footprints, softening edges. Inside, everything felt sharp. My thoughts, my disappointment, the echo of Noah's voice when he stood at my door just the day before. "She's sick, Mom. We have to go. You understand, right?" Yes, I had nodded. I always understood. I tried to keep busy. I wiped down the counters, folded the dish towels, rearranged the ornaments on the tree, though they didn't need rearranging. The house was silent except for the soft hum of carols playing from the old radio in the corner. I didn't feel like turning it off. The quiet would be worse. At some point, I made tea. I don't remember boiling the water or adding the sugar. I just remember sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug, the steam rising slowly in the dim light. My phone sat beside me, screen dark. I hadn't heard from anyone all day. No calls, no messages. Not even a text from Ellie. That's what stung most of all. She always sent me little things. Voice notes of her practicing piano or a picture of the snowman they built. This year, nothing. I reached for the phone and unlocked it. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was a message. I opened the messaging app. Nothing from Noah. Nothing from Ellie. I tapped over to Facebook even though I rarely used it. Too noisy, too full of other people's perfect lives. Still, it gave me something to do. I scrolled past pictures of neighbors' trees, their grandkids holding up sweaters and matching pajamas. A post from the local church about their nativity play. Someone's dog in a Santa hat. I almost closed the app. And then I saw it. Sophia's name, bolded under a new post. I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen, breath held in my throat. Then slowly I tapped. The photo opened. There they were. Noah. Sophia, her mother, Ellie, and Lucas. On a beach. A bright blue ocean stretched behind them, palm trees swaying. Sophia wore a sun hat and sunglasses, holding a pink cocktail with a tiny umbrella. Her mom, the one supposedly too sick to stand, was standing in the center, wrapped in a floral lei, tanned and laughing. Noah had his arm around her. His smile was wide, relaxed. Ellie looked off to the side, not quite smiling, while Lucas waved at the camera, his little hand a blur. I stared at the image, willing it to change, willing it to become something else. The caption read, "Best vacation with the best family. Hawaii is magic." My throat tightened. I zoomed in, trembling. There was no hospital room, no signs of illness, just sunshine and sand and betrayal. I couldn't breathe. I called Noah. It rang twice before he answered. "Mom, it's late," he said. His voice wasn't tired. It was irritated. Like I was a telemarketer interrupting dinner. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A pause. "With Sophia's mom." "I told you, don't lie to me," I said louder this time. "I saw the photo. You're in Hawaii." Silence on the line. "You're spying on us now," he snapped. "God, Mom, you're so clingy." Clingy. The word hit harder than I expected. "You said her mother was sick. You said it was urgent. I gave you $10,000, Noah. I gave you everything I had." He sighed long and exaggerated. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said, shaking. "I'm not." "It's not your business," he said coldly. "Drop it." "Not my business." My voice cracked. "You left me alone on Christmas and lied to me. You took my money and went on vacation. With them. Without a word. Stop being dramatic," he snapped. "You're too much. You always have been." Then he hung up. Just like that. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the glass. My face pale, tired, not even shocked. Just hollow. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I didn't bother to pick it up. I sat back in the chair, letting the quiet return. The radio in the background had shifted to "Oh Holy Night." I laughed once, dry and bitter. The irony wasn't lost on me. I looked toward the mantel, toward the photo of Mary in the silver frame. Her soft smile still steady after all these years. I could almost hear her voice telling me to breathe, telling me not to let this break me. But I was already broken. I got up slowly and walked to the living room. The tree lights twinkled in the corner, casting their glow on the gifts still beneath it. I knelt down and reached for the red package meant for Ellie. Her name was written in careful cursive on a white tag. To Ellie. Love, Grandma. I held the gift close and sat on the floor back against the couch. The house creaked in the cold. I looked around at everything I had prepared, everything I had hoped for. Then I remembered the drawer in the hutch by the hallway. The one where I kept special things, sentimental things. I stood, walked over, and opened it. There it was. A birthday card from Ellie. Last year. She had drawn a rainbow across the front with glitter glued along the edges. Inside, in her wobbly handwriting, it said, "Happy birthday, Grandma. I love you more than chocolate chip pancakes." I smiled, tears burning the corners of my eyes. I held the card to my chest and sat back down. How did we get here? How did Noah become someone who could look me in the eye, take my money, and leave me behind like I didn't matter? I remembered the day he came to me, looking panicked, voice trembling. "Mom, please, we don't know what to do. Sophia's mom, she needs surgery, we can't cover it all." He had grabbed my hands. "You're our only hope." I'd driven straight to the bank. No questions. No hesitation. I thought I was helping them. I thought I was still needed. But I wasn't needed. I was used. That night, the lights on the tree blinked on, blinking off like a heartbeat. I sat in the quiet, holding that birthday card and the photo of Mary, and let the weight of everything settle in. They were laughing on a beach while I sat here with leftovers and a broken promise. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel sad. I felt something else rising in me, a stillness, a clarity. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice they made, and I was going to make mine. The days after Christmas passed in a blur of silence. The house no longer smelled of cinnamon or cloves. Instead, it smelled like nothing at all. Just stale air and cold wood. I didn't open the curtains. The sun, when it did come out, only made the emptiness more obvious. I moved through the house like a shadow. I washed dishes that hadn't been used, folded blankets no one had touched, dusted picture frames that hadn't moved in years. I tried to stay busy thinking that movement would distract me. It didn't. The tree still stood in the corner of the living room, its lights blinking rhythmically. But now, instead of looking festive, it looked foolish, like it was mocking me for believing they'd show up, for cooking, for wrapping gifts with ribbons and handmade tags, for hoping. Sometimes I caught myself staring at the empty hallway, waiting for the sound of the front door. A laugh. A child's footsteps. But nothing came. Just the ticking of the old clock on the mantel and the occasional groan of the heating pipes. I slept too much. Then not at all. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and walk around the house in my robe, unsure of what I was looking for. Maybe I was searching for proof that it hadn't all been a lie. Maybe I just wanted to feel something other than this aching hollow in my chest. One morning I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee mug, staring out at the snow-covered backyard. The bird feeder was empty. I hadn't filled it since Christmas Eve. No birds came anymore. It struck me suddenly how easily the world moved on when you were hurting. I went into the study. I hadn't stepped inside since Mary passed. Her desk still sat in the corner, covered with her old papers, her handwriting looping across envelopes and recipe cards. I brushed off a thin layer of dust and sat down, the chair creaking beneath me. There was a drawer I hadn't opened in years, the one where she kept her most personal things. Cards, letters, scribbled notes from the kids. I pulled it open slowly like it might bite. Inside, neatly stacked, were dozens of letters, some from Noah when he was away at college, some from Mary's friends. But one envelope stood out. Thicker paper worn at the edges addressed to me in Mary's unmistakable handwriting. I held it in my hands for a moment before opening it. "Judith," it began. "If you're reading this, then something in you needs to be reminded." Her voice, quiet but firm, echoed in my mind. "You are kind, yes. Generous always. But don't confuse kindness with weakness. Don't let your heart become the thing others step over to get what they want. You don't owe anyone the pieces of yourself that they've already taken for granted." I stopped reading, tears welling. Her words hit too close. Loving people doesn't mean you stop protecting yourself. Don't let your goodness become your cage. Don't let your love become your silence. I folded the letter and held it to my chest. Mary had always known how to see right through me. I sat there for a long time, her letter still pressed against my heart as if it might fill the hole Noah had carved out. And something inside me shifted, not all at once, but just enough to stir the dust. I didn't want to be a victim. Not anymore. I walked into the living room and looked at the tree. The blinking lights, the presents still untouched. I knelt down and began to carefully remove the ornaments, one by one. I placed them back in their boxes, folded the tissue paper gently around each memory. Ellie's snowflake, Lucas's reindeer, the angel topper we'd used since Noah was a boy. I handled them all with care, but there was no ceremony, no sentimentality left. The act itself was quiet, but it felt like reclaiming something, like sweeping up the broken pieces of a party no one came to, and deciding it was okay to start fresh. I packed the decorations away and turned off the lights. The living room, now bare, looked more honest somehow. I didn't cry again that day. Instead, I made a list. It started simple: refill the bird feeder, take down the wreath, donate the unopened toys. Then something else crept in: call the bank, check the transfer receipt, find someone to talk to. That last one sat heavy on the page. I underlined it twice. I wasn't sure what I wanted from that someone yet. Advice, Validation. Just another voice in the room. But I knew this much. I needed to do something. Noah's betrayal had cracked something deep, but it also let in a sliver of light. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had permission to ask questions, to stop explaining myself, to protect the parts of me that still mattered. That night, I reread Mary's letter again, this time out loud. You don't owe anyone the pieces of yourself that they've already taken for granted. I closed the letter, slid it back into its envelope, and tucked it in my nightstand. Before bed, I opened a notebook I kept in the kitchen junk drawer. It was supposed to be for grocery lists and recipes, but now it would be for something else. I wrote across the top of the page, "Things that are still mine." Beneath it, I listed my home, my memories of Mary, Ellie's love, my dignity, my right to stop pretending. I put the notebook down and turned off the light. For the first time since Christmas, I slept through the night. And in the morning, when I opened the curtains, the snow was still falling, but it looked less like a trap and more like a reset. Not everything had to be beautiful to be true. Some things just needed to be real. The knock at the door came mid-morning, sharp and certain. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't had visitors since before Christmas, and after everything, I wasn't sure I wanted them. I stood for a moment in the hallway, debating whether to answer. Then I heard her voice through the door. "Judith. It's Amelia. You home." I opened it. There stood Amelia Ford, wrapped in a thick green scarf, her cheeks pink from the cold. In her hands was a plate wrapped in foil and a small gift bag with a sprig of pine tied to the handle. "Figured you could use a little post-holiday cheer," she said, stepping in before I could say no. "Don't worry, I won't stay long." I let the door close behind her. The truth was, Amelia had always been kind. We'd lived on the same street for 20 years, sharing garden tips in spring, and shoveling driveways side by side every winter. She'd lost her husband 2 years before Mary passed, and though we weren't close, we understood each other's silences. She handed me the plate. "Peach cobbler. Don't ask if it's store-bought." I smiled faintly and took it. "Smells like hope." She walked straight into the kitchen like she'd done it 100 times, though she never had. "I was going to bring it by earlier, but I saw Noah's car here before the holidays. Figured you had your hands full." I didn't answer right away. She turned around, her expression softening when she saw my face. What happened? And just like that, the wall broke. I hadn't told anyone, not a soul. But something in her tone, no judgment, just presence, opened the floodgates. I told her everything. Mom. How Noah had come by, said they were flying out to care for Sophia's sick mother. How I had given him $10,000, believing every word. How I'd cooked for 5 wrapped gifts for the kids and waited in vain. And then the photo, Hawaii cocktails, laughter, and the call where he told me I was being dramatic. Too much. Amelia listened without interrupting. Her hands rested on the mug of tea I'd poured, untouched. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "God, Judith," she said. "That's not just selfish, that's calculated." I nodded, eyes stinging again, though I was tired of crying. "I feel like a fool," I admitted. Not just for believing him, but for needing to believe him. For wanting to believe I still mattered. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You're not a fool. You're a mother." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that settles between people who know pain too well to fill the quiet with empty words. Then she added, "You know I was a lawyer, right?" I blinked. "You were?" She smiled. "For 32 years. Corporate litigation mostly. But I've seen enough fraud cases to know one when I hear it." My breath caught. "You think I could do something, Judith?" She said, her tone shifting from warm to sharp. "You gave him that money under false pretenses. He claimed it was for medical reasons. Instead, they used it for a luxury vacation. That's financial deception, plain and simple." I shook my head slowly. "But he's my son." She didn't flinch. "That doesn't make it right." I looked down at the table. "Even if I wanted to pursue it, I wouldn't know where to start." "Well, lucky for you, I do," she said, standing up suddenly. Where do you keep your records? In the hutch, I said. In the dining room. She was already moving. I followed her heart pounding. There was something strange about seeing Amelia. Practical peppermint cookie baking Amelia. Suddenly switch into another mode. Her steps were purposeful, her voice steady. I opened the drawer and pulled out the bank receipt first. The one with the transfer date and Noah's account number written clearly. 3 weeks ago, I said, he called, said Sophia's mother needed surgery. She examined the paper, then nodded. That's your anchor. We laid it out on the table along with the last few months of bank statements. She had brought a yellow notepad from her coat pocket and began jotting notes. Do you have any messages from him? Texts or emails about the money? I frowned, reaching for my phone. Just one. He texted, Thanks, Mom. You saved us. That was right after I sent the money. That might help, she said, writing it down. If he implied the money was for something urgent, you can argue you were manipulated. I looked at her. You really think this is worth pursuing? She looked back at me, eyes steady. I think it's worth standing up for yourself. I nodded slowly. Next step, she continued, is finding a lawyer who works with elderly financial abuse. It's more common than people think. The words stung. Elderly. But I didn't correct her. Maybe it was time I accepted that being older didn't mean being weaker. It just meant I had more to lose when I trusted the wrong people. She pulled her phone from her purse and typed in a number. I know someone. Charles Bennett. I worked cases with him back in the day. He's meticulous and discreet. She paused, then looked at me seriously. This doesn't have to become a courtroom drama. But sometimes a quiet legal nudge is enough to stop people from doing worse. I sat down, the receipt still in my hands. I don't want revenge, I said quietly. I just want to feel like I matter again. Amelia softened. Then let's take that feeling and turn it into something that protects you. You don't need to scream or burn bridges. You just need to stop giving away your peace to people who don't deserve it. That night, after she left, I sat alone with the papers still spread across the table. The receipt, the texts, her notes. It felt strange, like I was looking at a puzzle of my own life, finally seeing how all the pieces fit, and how long I'd been letting others draw the picture. I picked up a pen and wrote on a clean piece of paper what I know to be true. He lied to me. He used me. I am not weak for loving him, but I am done letting that love excuse his actions. The next morning, Amelia texted me a name and number. Charles Bennett. I saved it in my phone. I didn't call him right away, but I would. I had taken the first step, and this time I was walking towards something, not away. The following Thursday, I found myself sitting in a small, quiet office, tucked between a dry cleaner and a dental clinic in downtown Concord. The sign on the door read, Bennett and Associates Elder Law and Family Asset Protection. It felt like a mouthful for something so personal. Amelia had insisted on driving me. She waited in the parking lot sipping coffee and reading the paper while I sat in a leather chair facing a mahogany desk that looked like it had seen decades of hard conversations. Across from me was Charles Bennett. He was a tall, lean man in his 60s with neatly combed gray hair and a calm presence that didn't need to be loud to feel in control. His suit was simple navy blue, the kind you don't notice until you realize it fits perfectly. He offered me water, which I declined, then opened a yellow legal pad. So, Judith, he said, resting his elbows gently on the desk. Amelia tells me you're in a situation involving financial misrepresentation from a family member. I nodded, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Why don't you walk me through it in your own words, he said. So I did. I told him about Noah, about the phone call, the urgency in his voice, the claim that Sophia's mother was critically ill. I explained how I'd gone to the bank, transferred $10,000 to his account, no questions asked. And then how just days later I saw the photo of them all in Hawaii. Sophia's mother perfectly healthy, holding a cocktail on the beach. He didn't interrupt once. He just wrote in his pad, occasionally nodding. When I finished, I handed him a folder I had brought with me. Inside were the documents Amelia had helped me gather. The transfer receipt, the screenshot of the photo, the text message from Noah thanking me, the holiday date stamps. Charles reviewed each piece carefully. He read with the kind of patience that made you feel like every word mattered. When he was done, he placed the folder neatly on his desk and looked up at me. "This is not a small matter," he said calmly. "It's emotional, yes. But more importantly, from a legal standpoint, it qualifies as financial misrepresentation and potentially even elder fraud." The word made me wince. Elder fraud sounds like something that happens to people who get scammed over the phone. "It happens in families more often than you'd think," he said gently. "It's not about age, it's about trust, and how that trust was exploited." I nodded slowly. "So, what happens now?" He leaned back slightly. "First, let me be clear. You're not filing criminal charges. This is a civil matter. That means you're not sending your son to jail. But you are taking steps to protect your assets, set a legal boundary, and, if necessary, recover what was taken." "I don't care about the money," I said softly. "I believe you," he said. "But it's not just about money. It's about control. If he thinks he can manipulate you once and get away with it, what's to stop him from doing it again?" I swallowed hard. Charles continued, "Here's what I suggest. First, we file a temporary freeze on any joint or recurring transactions between you and Noah. You mentioned this was a one-time transfer, but if you've ever linked accounts in the past, credit cards, utilities, anything, we'll shut those doors." "I haven't," I said. "But I did give him access to help me set up online banking a few years ago." "That's enough," he said. "We'll change all login credentials today." He scribbled another note. "Second, we send a formal letter of demand to Noah, outlining the false claim, the misuse of funds, and the legal options available should he refuse to acknowledge and rectify the situation." My heart pounded. "You think he'll respond?" "I think he'll be shocked," Charles replied. "Most people who manipulate family expect silence, not a letterhead from an attorney." I looked out the window. A few people walked past in winter coats, chatting, holding shopping bags. Normal life. This didn't feel normal. "And third," I asked. Charles paused. "This one's optional, but I recommend it, especially in cases like yours. We anonymously submit the story to the local paper, names withheld. But the core facts made public." I blinked. "A newspaper." "Yes. Emotional abuse thrives in secrecy. Public scrutiny, even anonymous, puts pressure on the abuser to step back and reevaluate. It also lets people in similar situations know they're not alone." I didn't speak for a moment. My hands trembled slightly. I gripped the armrests of the chair. "Judith," he said gently, "you've done nothing wrong. You trusted your son. You acted out of love. What you're doing now isn't revenge, it's drawing a boundary." I nodded slowly. I still don't recognize him. That he could lie like that, use me like that." Charles gave a small, understanding smile. "Sometimes people think blood means entitlement, that parents are permanent safety nets. But safety nets are not meant to be climbed on and cut through." He reached into a drawer and handed me a stack of forms. "These are authorizations. I'll need your signature so I can file the freeze and send the notice. You don't have to decide about the paper now, but I want you to know it's an option." I took the pen and signed. Each stroke of ink felt heavier than the last. But with every signature I felt something shift, something I hadn't expected. Relief. It wasn't anger that carried my hand. It was clarity. When I was done, Charles stood and shook my hand. "We'll send the letter this afternoon," he said. "Expect a reaction. People don't like being called out, even privately." "I'm not scared of him," I replied. "Not anymore." Charles smiled. "Good." As I walked out of the office and into the sharp winter air, I felt lighter. Not happy, not triumphant, but grounded. I looked across the street where Amelia's car waited, a familiar silhouette behind the wheel. I climbed in, closed the door, and turned to her. "Well?" she asked. "It's done," I said. She nodded. "Good. Now we wait." And as we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the quiet law office and thought, this is where the line was drawn. Not in anger, not in shame, but in quiet, firm resolve. Because I wasn't going to be used again. Not by my own son. Not by anyone. The newspaper landed on my porch just after sunrise. I hadn't been expecting it so soon. Charles said it would likely take a few days for the piece to go through, maybe a week, depending on space and timing. But there it was, folded neatly in half, the ink still smelling fresh. I stood there in my robe and slippers, the cold seeping through the porch boards, and stared at the headline printed in bold across the top of the Concord Chronicle's community page. Local widow, allegedly, defrauded by son over holiday vacation funds. My name wasn't mentioned, just as Charles had promised. But the details were there. The timing, the dollar amount, the reference to a promised medical emergency that turned out to be a luxury trip. I read the article twice while standing at the kitchen counter, the paper flattening beneath my hand. It was strange seeing your own pain laid out like that. Not exaggerated, not dramatized, just reported. Clean, precise, and true. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. What I felt was nervous. The kind of nervous that creeps in when you know the silence is about to be broken. By noon it was. My phone buzzed, non-stop. At first it was just notifications. Facebook posts, tags, comments. I hadn't logged into Facebook in days, maybe weeks, but now my account was lighting up like the 4th of July. I finally gave in and opened the app. Sophia had made a post. It was long and dramatic, crafted carefully for an audience. There were no names, but anyone who knew us would connect the dots in seconds. Some people would rather destroy a family than let go of a grudge. It's heartbreaking when our children see this kind of bitterness, especially during the holidays. We're choosing peace, but others seem to thrive on tearing people down. She'd added a photo of Ellie and Lucas playing on the beach, the kind of candid that made them look joyful and free. The comments were flooding in. "You're such a strong mama. Don't let toxic people ruin your joy. Your kids are lucky to have you." Some of the names in the comments made my stomach turn. Neighbors, church friends. Even David Palmer, an old family friend from down the street, had written, "Keep your chin up. People will see through the noise." I closed the app and set the phone down, my hand trembling slightly. Not from anger, from the quiet ache of being misunderstood. I stood at the window for a while, watching a squirrel hop through the snow under the maple tree. The house was still the kind of still that feels like it's waiting for something. But I already knew what was coming. The looks, the questions, the doubt. Later that afternoon, I went to pick up some groceries. Just the essentials. I didn't want to see anyone, but I needed to get out of the house. The woman at the checkout counter, someone I'd known for years, smiled politely but didn't meet my eyes. Another neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, gave me a hesitant wave and quickly turned away when I approached the cereal aisle. They didn't have to say anything. Their silence spoke plenty. When I got home, I found a voicemail waiting. "David," Judith. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Sophia's post this morning. It's got some people talking. If you want to talk, I'm here. Maybe we can clear the air." "Give me a ring. Clear the air." The phrase echoed in my head. As if what I'd done was stir up trouble instead of protecting myself from it. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat down at the dining room table. I opened my notebook, the one where I'd been keeping track of everything since the day Noah left, and turned to a clean page. Then I pulled out a pen and began writing. Dear Noah, this isn't a letter of anger. I've had plenty of that, and it never healed anything. This is simply what I need to say and what I hope you'll one day be ready to hear. You made a choice. You looked me in the eye, told me your mother-in-law was sick, asked for help, and took what I gave you. Then you boarded a plane with your wife and children and left me behind. That would have been enough to break my heart, but then you told the world that I was the one causing pain. I never asked for war. I never raised my voice. I simply drew a line. I love you. I always have. But love without truth is not love. It's captivity. You have the right to choose your path. You can live the life you and Sophia have built, and I will not interfere. But I also have the right to choose mine. And I choose peace. Not the performative kind you post about on Facebook, but real peace. The kind that requires boundaries, honesty, and sometimes distance. I'm not asking for anything from you. Not money, not apology, not even understanding. But I need you to know this. You can no longer define who I am. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into an envelope. I didn't plan to mail it right away. Maybe not ever. But writing it felt like closing a door that had been swinging open in the wind for too long. That evening, Amelia stopped by. She didn't come in, just stood on the porch in her puffy red coat holding a paper bag. Homemade soup, she said, and half the town's losing their minds over that article. I smiled faintly. I saw. Let them talk, she said. Truth has its own rhythm. It doesn't need a microphone. I nodded, and she squeezed my arm gently before heading back into the cold. That night, I sat in the armchair beside the fireplace, the envelope resting on the side table. I watched the flames flicker and thought of all the years I'd spent swallowing my discomfort, brushing things under the rug, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But this wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning, not loud, not cruel, just necessary. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. Because I finally understood myself. It was just after 10 when the phone lit up on my nightstand. I had been lying in bed, not quite asleep, just drifting in that quiet place where thoughts slow down enough to feel manageable. I expected it to be a weather alert, or maybe another comment notification from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. But it wasn't. The name on the screen stopped my breath. Ellie! I sat up straight, heart thudding. The message was short. Grandma, can I call you? I tapped out a reply immediately. Of course, sweetheart. Whenever you're ready. The minutes that followed felt like a lifetime. I walked quietly into the kitchen and turned on the small lamp by the sink, the one that made the room glow like a warm memory. I didn't want to miss her call. I couldn't. When the phone finally rang, I answered before the first chime had finished. Grandma. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Hi, baby, I said gently. Is everything okay? There was a pause, and I could hear her shifting, maybe under a blanket. I had to sneak the phone, she said. We're in a hotel. I'm hiding in the bathroom. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. You don't have to do that. I wanted to, she said, more certain this time. I miss you. I miss you too, I said. Every single day. Another pause. Mom's been crying a lot, she said. I heard her last night. She said everything's messed up, that the family's falling apart. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Is it because of you? She asked. Not accusing, just searching. I took a deep breath. Sweetheart, sometimes adults don't agree on what's right or wrong. And sometimes when someone gets hurt, people try to cover it up because they're not ready to face the truth. She didn't say anything for a moment. I let the silence be soft. Did you really give Dad money? She asked. I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Yes, I did. And he said it was for Grandma Sophia, right? That's what he told me. But she wasn't sick, Ellie said, voice flat. No, I said quietly. She wasn't. I waited, unsure of what she might say next. I didn't want to burden her with more than she could carry, but I also didn't want to lie. She deserved at least one adult in her life who would treat her like someone worth telling the truth to. Why would they do that? She whispered. I don't know, I said honestly. Sometimes people make choices that feel easier in the moment, even if they hurt others, and sometimes they convince themselves it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal, she said. Right. It is to me, I replied. There was a rustling sound, and I imagined her curling up on the cold tile floor legs tucked under her pajama pants, her little fingers gripping the phone like it held everything steady. I'm proud of you, she said suddenly. I blinked. What I heard Mom yelling about how you made everything public, about the newspaper, about the lawyer, but you didn't yell. You just said what happened. I think that's brave. I couldn't speak. Even if everyone's mad, I still think it's good to tell the truth. Ellie, I said, my voice trembling. You have no idea what it means to hear that. I just wanted you to know, she said. I know you didn't want to hurt anybody. No, I said. I didn't. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Are you mad at Dad? I sighed, pressing the heel of my hand to my chest. No, sweetheart. I'm hurt. That's different. Do you still love him always? Another silence. Do you still love me? She asked, and it nearly broke me. Ellie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, there is nothing in this world that could make me stop loving you. Nothing, not ever. Good, she said, because sometimes it feels like everyone's picking sides. I don't need you to pick a side, I told her. You're allowed to love your parents and love me. You don't have to choose. But I want to talk to you more, she said. Can I still do that? Even if they're mad? I hesitated, then said carefully, Let's keep it between us for now, just until things settle down. Okay. Okay. There was a long pause. I heard her breathing steady and small. I hope you're not lonely, she said finally. I looked around the quiet kitchen, the plate of untouched cookies on the counter, the stillness that had blanketed this house since before Christmas. And yet, in that moment, I didn't feel alone. I'm not lonely right now, I said softly. Not at all. Good, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I should go, she added, before Mom notices. All right, you call me whenever you need to. I mean it. I will. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, Ellie. So very much. The call ended with a soft click, but the warmth it left behind lingered. I sat there for a while, holding the phone in my hand, staring out into the quiet room. The letter I'd written to Noah still sat unopened on the table. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. But I didn't need to right now. Ellie's words had been more powerful than any line I'd written. I didn't need the world to understand me, just her. And she did. It was a quiet afternoon when the knock came. I had been sitting in the living room nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, the winter light stretching long shadows across the floor. The knock wasn't casual. It was firm, deliberate, and oddly familiar. I knew before I even opened the door. Noah and Sophia stood on the porch. They looked different, not like the polished, curated versions I had seen in photos. Not like the glowing beach family from Hawaii. Their faces were pale, tired. Sophia's hair was pulled into a tight bun, no makeup, her expression unreadable. Noah's shoulders were tense, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. There was no sign of Ellie or Lucas. Can we come in? Noah asked, his voice low. I didn't answer right away. I simply stepped back and held the door open. They walked in quietly, Sophia glancing around the house like it might speak back to her. The living room was just as it had been for weeks. Tree taken down, furniture in place, the smell of cinnamon long faded but not yet forgotten. They sat on the couch without being invited, and I remained standing. I didn't need the elevation to feel strong. I already was. Noah looked up at me. Mom, he began. We're sorry. I didn't respond. I just watched. We messed up, he continued. Things got out of hand. Sophia nodded, wringing a tissue in her lap. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought... I don't know what we thought. We didn't plan for it to turn into all this. I kept my gaze steady. We want to make it right, Noah added. We'll pay you back. Every cent. Just drop the lawsuit, please. There it was. The reason they came. Not for reconciliation, not to understand, not to take responsibility. They came to erase consequences. I walked to the mantel and adjusted a photo frame slightly. Mary and me on our 30th anniversary. Her hand rested on my shoulder in the picture, her smile warm and knowing. When I turned back to them, I spoke softly. "This isn't about money," I said. Noah looked confused. "But we'll pay you back, I swear. It was never about stealing." "No," I said. "It wasn't about stealing. It was about lying. It was about looking me in the eye and deciding that I was gullible enough to believe anything. That I was disposable enough to be excluded." Sophia's eyes began to water, but I didn't look at her. "You asked for help," I continued. "You told me someone was sick. You used my concern to get what you wanted. Then you left me here alone on Christmas. And you didn't even have the decency to tell the truth afterward. You let people believe I was the one who caused harm." Noah stood slowly, like the couch had become too heavy. We were under pressure. "It wasn't that we didn't care." "I know you didn't care," I said, cutting him off gently. That was the clearest part of all. He opened his mouth to speak again, but I raised a hand. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing this because for too long I've allowed myself to be the person who understands everything, who forgives before being asked, who gives without expecting anything in return." I looked at him. Really looked. I'm tired of being treated like I don't know what's going on, like I'm just an old woman who'll smile and stay quiet. Sophia finally spoke. "We're family, Judith. This lawsuit, this article, it's tearing us apart." "No," I said. "You tore us apart." She flinched. "The article didn't lie. I didn't lie. The only people who lied were the ones asking me to drop this now that it's inconvenient." Noah's voice cracked. "What do you want from us?" "Do you want us to beg? Fine. We're here. We're begging." I shook my head. "I don't want anything from you." They stood there in silence, the weight of my words settling around them like snow. No raised voices, no accusations, just the kind of truth that didn't need a stage. "I'm not angry," I said. "Not anymore. I'm just done." Sophia stepped forward, tears streaming. "Please, think of the kids." "I do," I said. "Every day. I think of how they'll grow up learning which stories are safe to tell, which truths are allowed. And I think of how one day they'll ask why I stopped calling, why I stepped back. And I'll tell them the truth, not to turn them against you, but so they understand what silence costs." Noah wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, spiritually. "Mom, can we fix this?" "Fixing something requires trust," I said. "And right now there's none." He dropped his gaze. "You can leave the check if you have it," I added. "But it won't change what I've chosen." He reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope, and placed it on the coffee table. I didn't touch it. I watched them walk toward the door. Sophia turned back once, but I didn't. They stepped into the cold. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet that followed. It didn't hurt the way I thought it might. It felt like something closing, something necessary. I sat down in the armchair and watched the snow fall outside the window. It layered the porch, the walkway, the driveway, covering everything. Starting over? I wasn't at peace yet, but I was no longer waiting to be rescued from my own life. That was something I had learned to do for myself. Amelia's house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic, warm and inviting. She had texted me earlier that morning, "Dinner's on at 6. Just bring your appetite." I hadn't planned on doing anything social, not after what had happened with Noah and Sophia just days before. But something in her message and the way she didn't ask but welcomed me anyway made me say yes. I brought a bottle of red wine that had been sitting unopened in my pantry since last Christmas. It wasn't a celebration, not exactly, but it felt like the right time to open something that had waited patiently. She greeted me at the door in a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her living room glowed with soft lamps and a few leftover fairy lights around the mantel. Nothing loud or festive, just a space that made you feel like you belonged. "Come in," she said, already turning back toward the kitchen. Soup's still simmering, chicken and wild rice, and I made those cheesy biscuits you liked last fall. I hung up my coat and followed her in. Dinner was simple but full of comfort. We ate at the kitchen table side by side like old friends who didn't need to fill every silence. Between bites of bread and sips of wine we talked. About the newspaper article and the ripple it caused in the neighborhood. About the knock at my door and the envelope Noah left behind. About how strange it felt to finally say no without apology. And then about what comes next. "So what now?" Amelia asked, her spoon resting in her bowl. I looked out the window. Snow was beginning to fall again, soft and slow. "I don't know," I said. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for weeks. Years, maybe." She nodded. "You've made space now. That breath is yours again. What do you want to do with it?" It was a question no one had asked me in a very long time. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small manila folder. I slid it across the table. Amelia raised an eyebrow but didn't open it. "My will," I said. "I updated it this morning. Had Charles draft it." "You're not dying," she said plainly. "I'm not." "But I am finally living with intention," I replied. "It's time my plans reflect that." She opened the folder slowly and scanned the top page. Then the second. Her brow furrowed slightly as she reached the section I'd highlighted. A clause that made Ellie and Lucas the primary beneficiaries. But with a condition. They'll receive everything I said, but only if they grow into people who show love, not just expect it. If they learn to care, not control. If they treat others with respect, no matter how old or how inconvenient. Amelia looked at me, her expression unreadable at first. Then slowly, a smile began to form. "Judith," she said, "this isn't just a will. It's a legacy. It's a hope," I said, "that they'll remember what matters, that they'll look back one day and understand." She closed the folder and handed it back to me with a soft nod. "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you want right now?" I hesitated, then smiled. "A beach, a warm breeze, maybe a drink with an umbrella in it." Her eyes sparkled. "Are you serious? I already booked the ticket?" I said, pulling a printed itinerary from my bag. "Hawaii, next week?" Amelia's mouth dropped open in the most satisfying way. "You're going to the same place? Not the same resort," I said, "but close enough to stand on that sand and make new memories." She leaned back in her chair, still holding her wine glass. "You didn't tell anyone." I shook my head. "I don't need them to know. This isn't about proving anything. It's about letting go." She raised her glass. "To letting go." I clinked mine against hers. "To starting over." We sat for a while longer, sharing stories that had nothing to do with lawsuits or family drama. We talked about books we wanted to read, recipes we never had time to try, dreams we hadn't dared say aloud when our lives revolved around everyone else's needs. Before I left, Amelia hugged me at the door. "Send me a photo," she said, "of your feet in the sand. I might just send a picture of my empty wine glass," I replied. "I'll take it." That night back in my own home, I packed slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't overthink it. I folded lightweight clothes into a small suitcase, tucked a paperback into the side pocket, and slipped the updated will into the fireproof box in my closet. I walked through the house once more, turning off lights, straightening a throw pillow, checking the back door. I paused by the fireplace where Mary's photo still rested. "I'm finally going," I whispered to her. "Not chasing, just going." And as I turned out the last light, the house didn't feel empty. It felt paused, ready. The next morning I woke to sunlight instead of snow. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for my phone or check for messages. I just breathed. A long, full breath. And smiled. Amelia's house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic, warm and inviting. She had texted me earlier that morning, "Dinner's on at 6. Just bring your appetite." I hadn't planned on doing anything social. Not after what had happened with Noah and Sophia just days before. But something in her message and the way she didn't ask but welcomed me anyway made me say yes. I brought a bottle of red wine that had been sitting unopened in my pantry since last Christmas. It wasn't a celebration, not exactly, but it felt like the right time to open something that had waited patiently. She greeted me at the door in a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her living room glowed with soft lamps and a few leftover fairy lights around the mantel. Nothing loud or festive, just a space that made you feel like you belonged. "Come in," she said, already turning back toward the kitchen. "Soup's still simmering. Chicken and wild rice. And I made those cheesy biscuits you liked last fall." I hung up my coat and followed her in. Dinner was simple but full of comfort. We ate at the kitchen table side by side like old friends who didn't need to fill every silence. Between bites of bread and sips of wine, we talked. About the newspaper article and the ripple it caused in the neighborhood. About the knock at my door and the envelope Noah left behind. About how strange it felt to finally say no without apology. And then about what comes next. "So what now?" Amelia asked, her spoon resting in her bowl. I looked out the window. Snow was beginning to fall again, soft and slow. "I don't know," I said. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for weeks. Years, maybe." She nodded. "You've made space now. That breath is yours again. What do you want to do with it?" It was a question no one had asked me in a very long time. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small manila folder. I slid it across the table. Amelia raised an eyebrow but didn't open it. "My will," I said. "I updated it this morning. Had Charles draft it." "You're not dying," she said plainly. "I'm not. But I am finally living with intention," I replied. "It's time my plans reflect that." She opened the folder slowly and scanned the top page. Then the second. Her brow furrowed slightly as she reached the section I'd highlighted. A clause that made Ellie and Lucas the primary beneficiaries. But with a condition. They'll receive everything I said, but only if they grow into people who show love, not just expect it. If they learn to care, not control. If they treat others with respect, no matter how old or how inconvenient. Amelia looked at me, her expression unreadable at first. Then slowly a smile began to form. "Judith," she said, "this isn't just a will. It's a legacy. It's a hope," I said, "that they'll remember what matters. That they'll look back one day and understand." She closed the folder and handed it back to me with a soft nod. "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you want right now?" I hesitated, then smiled. "A beach, a warm breeze, maybe a drink with an umbrella in it." Her eyes sparkled. "Are you serious? I already booked the ticket?" I said, pulling a printed itinerary from my bag. "Hawaii, next week." Amelia's mouth dropped open in the most satisfying way. "You're going to the same place, not the same resort," I said, "but close enough to stand on that sand and make new memories." She leaned back in her chair, still holding her wine glass. "You didn't tell anyone," I shook my head. "I don't need them to know. This isn't about proving anything. It's about letting go." She raised her glass. "To letting go?" I clinked mine against hers. "To starting over." We sat for a while longer, sharing stories that had nothing to do with lawsuits or family drama. We talked about books we wanted to read, recipes we never had time to try, dreams we hadn't dared say aloud when our lives revolved around everyone else's needs. Before I left, Amelia hugged me at the door. "Send me a photo," she said, "of your feet in the sand." "I might just send a picture of my empty wine glass," I replied. "I'll take it." That night back in my own home, I packed slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't overthink it. I folded lightweight clothes into a small suitcase, tucked a paperback into the side pocket, and slipped the updated will into the fireproof box in my closet. I walked through the house once more, turning off lights, straightening a throw pillow, checking the back door. I paused by the fireplace where Mary's photo still rested. "I'm finally going," I whispered to her. Not chasing, just going. And as I turned out the last light, the house didn't feel empty. It felt paused, ready. The next morning, I woke to sunlight instead of snow, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for my phone or check for messages. I just breathed, a long, full breath, and smiled. Have you ever reached a moment when silence spoke louder than anger? When walking away felt more powerful than fighting back? Judith's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming peace, setting quiet boundaries, and learning that love doesn't mean losing yourself. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, used, or quietly strong in the face of heartbreak, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story too. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more heartfelt stories like this one. Your voice matters here. Thank you for listening.